Hey guys, this is Sakimichan and welcome to another voiceover tutorial. This time it's on Portrait 101 Part 2, following the Part 1 of last term's voiceover tutorial. So last tutorial we talked about the fundamentals and the basics for how to compose a face. So we talked about proportions, how to demonstrate basic volumes, how to do angles, and etc. This time we're going to focus more on painting, and we're going to use all that knowledge we talked about in the last tutorial and we're going to apply it to this tutorial. So today we're going to work on how to paint with line art. So half line art and half painting, and we'll see how we can transition from the line art to a fully painted portrait. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so first off we have to go pick a color for the sketch. So I picked the black, and we'll set the brush size to 5 pixels, and I'm using the standard hard round brush, and we're just gonna do a really rough sketch right here. And I'm gonna start. Let's see. Alright, let me take some time to think about it, because sometimes the idea don't just come right away, so we have to wait. So let's see here. Let me see. Sorry for the wait. Just think about it. If you're not sure of what you want to do but you have a slight idea, I would recommend you guys to maybe look up some concepts for games, or just go on Google or DeviantArt for inspiration. That's what I sometimes do. If I'm not sure what I want to draw, I just do some little research, maybe get inspired by animals. Some of the animals have pretty cool design, like goldfish, right? Or other species. Reptiles are kind of cool too. So anyhow, oh yeah, so the canvas I'm drawing on is my own, but I included another canvas for you guys to practice. So I named the folder Your Turn. You guys can access the folder, and you can follow my example or you can do your own. So right now I'm just sketching my own thing, but you guys can follow along and sketch what you guys want, or you could just use my example. Also, I have included a constraint. So how do you do that? Right now it's not constraint. How we're going to constrain is we're going to click on Alt, and that will bring us a little tool, a rectangle with an arrow, and then we're going to click on the layer that is on the bottom, which then will constrain the layer you're currently using to the layer that is underneath. So now it's like you can't go outside the box, and we're just gonna continue now. And yeah, I'm feeling a little inspired, and I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do because it's a little difficult to come up with a design on the spot. But usually what I do is I'll just keep drawing and hopefully something jumps out at me, pretty much. So now we're gonna go back. So in part 1 we talked about proportions. So pretty much we leave the eyebrows at about upper middle part of the whole face, the nose, between the eyebrows and the chin, and the mouth is between the nose and the chin. And yeah, I'm just going to... Oh, also I have my brush with pen pressure right now, and I usually sketch with an opacity of 100%, and also I paint with that opacity. So we're going to try to come up with an idea. You guys don't have to follow along, but it would help if you guys could start doodling your own thing on the other canvas. So when it comes to the fun part, we can all do it together. So yeah, we're just going to add some eyebrows here and there, starting to add a little detail here and there. It can be a slow process, but we'll get to it. So as you notice, I speeded up a little bit, but pretty much I'm just doing a really rough sketch, And anything will do, it's just for the idea. You don't have to make everything perfect, just a really rough idea. Usually we want to keep it rough at the stage to save time. And of course you can transform your sketch a little bit to see what looks best, and you can do that by holding Ctrl T, which allows you to a box will appear, and that you can manipulate it to resize or make it smaller or bigger, and pretty much trying to make your portrait fit into the composition. So it's a really useful tool to use, and usually that's what I do. And now I'm just gonna see what I can come up with, just some random ideas, nothing final yet. This is usually very rough, and you want to keep it within maybe 5 to 15 minutes sketch time. Really rough first pass, nothing too serious, just something to get you guys creativity flowing. And we're just going to do some rough sketches, and let's see what we can get. And I came up with that she might be wearing a hood. That might be interesting. I'm getting inspired by aquatics obviously here. And you're never too sure. The good thing with doing painting is that you don't get constrained by the lines, and usually it's very malleable. But with lines, when you have something you want to change, you're gonna have to go back to the lines and change it and then fix it in the coloring process. That's why I find it a little tedious for my taste, and I usually like to paint more because I don't need to worry about that stuff. But yeah, we're just going to do some rough passes, and gonna clean up the sketch a little bit. There's still a lot of details we don't have, and now we're going to make that layer, lower the opacity of that layer and make another layer on top of it. And now I'm just going to do a really rough pass, another pass on top of it. This pass will be the final, and remember, this pass doesn't need to be super clean or anything. It just needs to be more solidified in idea. And as you can see, I'm starting to refine a few areas, but still my lines aren't super clean. It's just I'm cleaning up a little bit more, but I'm still trying to find ideas. But I'm still not sure. I'm just testing the waters and see what we can get. And yep, just drawing her hair right now, her neck, and we're still not sure. But this pass will be the path we're going to use for painting, and I'll show you shortly how it's gonna look like. So pretty much you guys can just use the sketch I will be providing you guys, which is the finished version of this one, or you guys can do your own. Anything would do, like maybe doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be a portrait of a girl or a boy, or I don't know, antro, if you feel like it. I mean, anything. Sorry about that, the phone rang when I was recording, but now we're back. Alright, so I'm just trying to finish up the concept I have, and as you can see, my lines are really rough and very shaky. That's also one of the reasons why I don't do liner, is because my hand is fairly shaky and my lines aren't that straight. So yeah, I mean, I don't want my lines to look all wonky. That's why I paint, because painting you don't really need to have straight lines, and it's all about painting shapes, volumes, shadow, and lighting, highlight. Yeah, highlight. Also, I never had color fundamentals or any type of painting fundamental class, so my vocabulary is a little bit non-professional. I just tend to use the words that I know, and I try to express what I mean. So I hope you guys can understand it. I mean, I've never had real formal training, but I did love to pick up useful knowledge from other artists, and I often look at them and get inspired from them. Yep, now we're going to move on to the clothes and see what we can get. I'm feeling a little bit of diagonal lines, but I'm still not sure. So right now you can see that there's the first path and the second path, and I'm going to copy paste the second path sketch onto your folder in case you guys want to just use that sketch for what we're gonna do next, which is we're gonna start coloring. And yeah, you can kind of see that this is the first pass on my side, on my canvas, and you can see how it is a little different from the second pass that we're going to be using, which is more refined, and it's a little different, but at the same time I kept a little bit of the same thing going on, and now we're gonna start doing something fun, which is the coloring. So let's get started. The first thing we'll be doing is just let's create another layer for the color. So pretty much everything's gonna be constrained to the canvas layer, and we're gonna use the lasso tool and just select it on the side. And now we're gonna make the selection. We're gonna select all the characters, so we're gonna just go on and contour the lines. Right now I'm just doing patches by patches, so I mean, you guys can try to do it in one shot, but usually I do it in patches in case I mess up, and I can always go back. So let's just select all the character, and yeah, you guys don't have to make it super clean. It could be a little rough. I mean, it's just so you get most of the shape in there. You don't have to make it perfect. Now we're gonna select a gray tone, which I selected a warm gray tone, and then we're gonna fill it up into the selection. Now we have it all filled up, and the layer should be underneath the line art layer. Now I'm just adjusting the opacity of the lines to see which degree I want to be using, because we'll be using that. Now I'm gonna go back, and yeah, it could be any gray tone, honestly. It could be any. It could be blue or purple, but just make sure it's sort of gray. So now we're ready to go. We're almost ready. Just make sure everything's good. Layers locked. And now we're going to put the lines to multiply mode and turn down the opacity slightly. Usually, let's say 50% for the first pass. And now we're gonna go back to the color layer. And this time we're going to do a basic pass on the skin tone. So pretty much we want to get a very neutral color skin tone, usually somewhere in the gray area, and then somewhere very neutral. Again, you can put any skin tone color that you want. Just make sure it's somewhere in that spot where it's grayish and not too saturated and not too dark. So very, very neutral tone right there. But for now I'm gonna stick to a more fleshy color, and yeah, pretty much I think we're gonna use that color. Again, you don't need to use the same color as me, but just remember the base color should be a little neutral, not too dark, not too bright, just very neutral, kind of like the color of toast, I suppose. So yeah, we're just gonna do a really fast pass and just paint out the skin, and then we're gonna pick a color for the hair, I believe. And again, I'm using the same principle as the skin color picking, just something very neutral towards the gray area, not too dark, not too bright, very neutral. And we're gonna just put that color there. By picking a very neutral color, we have more possibilities for the highlights and the shadows. So let's just put the color there. And again, very rough. I'm using the standard round brush, and with opacity to 100. And now I'm gonna pick a color for her clothes. Again, something neutral But this time you don't need to stick too strict to the shading rule. I mean, I kind of prefer maybe her clothes would be pretty cool with a lighter color, just to make her hair stand out maybe. And now I'm just going to do a very rough path, and maybe with golden trimmings on her hood might look good. So I'm just going to fill that in very carefully. Actually, you don't need to be careful. Just do it very roughly. You don't want to spend too much time on this. So I'm just gonna shade in the rest of her outfit fairly fast. And blue to finish off her undershirt maybe. And pretty much I will just keep shading, just refine the coloring a little bit because it's very messy, but still we want to keep it messy because we don't want to make it too clean at first. And pretty much also you can probably also for the background I chose a darker color because I want the characters to stand out. The number one rule that I have is I want to always make the character stand out from the background. So if the character has a lighter color, overall lighter color, the background should be somewhat darker to make the character stand out. If the character has mostly darker color on, then the background should be a little lighter to make the character stand out. So right now the background is really simple. I'm just using a airbrush to lightly brush on the background. So now we're gonna go back, and I believe we're going to try to apply for the shadow. And now we're gonna go into the brush mode, select the multiply brush mode, and we're gonna pick a darker skin color and press OK. And make sure still it's on multiply, the brush mode is on multiply, right? Make sure it's on multiply, right there. Make sure it's there because that will make all the color underneath darker. And again, we're gonna go back and select a darker skin color. And now we're gonna just brush on somewhat of a shadow. And just contour the eyes, the nose, the chin, the clavicle, everything just lightly, very general, nothing too specific. And now we're gonna shade the hair a little bit, again with the same thing we did with the face, just lightly shade it down. And take note of the drop shadows of the hat, put some shadow under there, just some very general shadowing here and there. It doesn't need to be perfect. Everything I do at this point is very rough. And now we're gonna shade the hat, again following the same shading pattern, which is having the light coming from the left side of the canvas. And pretty much just apply a really rough shadowing. And now we're gonna select, oh, now I'm just going to make some step record of how I did stuff. So now we're gonna flip the canvas. Flipping the canvas is useful because it allows you to see mistake you haven't seen as you get quite used to a certain view if you paint on it too much. So if you have been painting on one side of the canvas for too long, you tend to not notice mistake as much, and that's why we flip the canvas. And now I'm just going to add some very small rim light. So pretty much one of the rules there is to make your painting look more 3D is you would have a general light source, and then you would have a rim light, which is the light from the very steep side of your character, and it will cast a very thin but intense lighting on one side of their face, hair, and whatever accessory they're wearing. So now I'm just doing that. And now I'm adding really quick highlight, again I'm using this time I'm using the airbrush, but with a bit of hardness. I usually turn it to 50%, and now I'm just shading the shadow and highlight. I'm just blending it very subtly. Again, I'm not doing very perfectly, just roughly, just to get the idea of it. It's pretty fun, and yeah, and I will be doing this for a little while. It could take a while. So pretty much shade on, shade off, kind of like Karate Kid but with digital painting. Yep, just gonna blend that. Again, I'm using the eyedrop tool. If you want to see my setting, it's select either the hard brush or the airbrush and turn it to 50% on hardness, and just keep shading, keep shading, keep shading. If you guys notice, I'm actually doing a narration over, as I kind of failed to do the voiceover at the same time as I was painting, and something happened, and now I have to put on the narration over, so it's a little, some parts of my tutorial will be a little laggy, but I will still bring up a lot of points. So pretty much shading the hair, adding the shadow, and now I'm just adding a little whiteness to her hairpiece there. And just keep in mind that when you're designing a character with the color choices, usually in character design we tend to have the color match. So if you had white and golden trimming on her hat, it would make sense to have that again on other parts of her accessories, such as her hairpiece, and that's what I was thinking. And now I'm considering adding a little streak to her hair, because streaking different color streaks on her hair adds more character, and that's what I usually tend to do. Whatever you can do to make your character more interesting. Now I'm just picking a color for her eyes, which I'm starting with a very, very dark color for now. It's not going to be final, it's just going to fill out the colors so her eyes don't look too unfinished compared to the rest of her. So now I'm adding a little bit of eye bag for her, but not too much, just because eye bags adds more personality, I guess. So pretty much we're just gonna keep shading in her face, adding some volume here and there. If you're not sure where to put highlights or anything, I would recommend you guys to look at your own face, or you could also go to Google and look up maybe just some pictures of random people just to get an idea, or you can just refer to other people's drawing, but I wouldn't, because that tends to be very biased, as every artist have their own style. And if you want to really create your own style, looking at real life photos would help, because it will help you study what a real human being look like, and that will help you to take the knowledge and use the knowledge to develop your own style. And usually that's what I do. I probably go on Tumblr and look up maybe random people's, like there's a lot of good looking people on Tumblr. I usually look at them and then I'll be like, oh, that guy has a nice nose, or oh, that girl has pretty eyes. I would just look at them and then remember some of the details I like and then add that to my drawings. That's why usually I don't look at other artists' art, or I don't try to mimic them, because in the end, if you want to have something unique to your own, it's best to start with the fundamentals, like real life people, or just your own face, I suppose, something that other people don't have and is unique to yourself. So yeah, and now I'm gonna flip again to see what looks good, and if there's a mistake I could fix. So now it's starting to look like something. And also you can adjust your color or saturation. Right now I'm just going to the background and I'm adjusting my hue saturation for the background because I want to make the character stand out a little more, and the blue background that we had before didn't do very good job because my hair is kind of blue and I don't want it to blend in too much with the background. And now I'm just going in and see what I can do with her hair. I think I'll make it a little darker because I find it, I kind of like it darker. So I'm just going with my guts. You guys can obviously do different edits as you go about painting your own character, and this will help you a lot. Usually I do tons of this because I'm never really sure about what color I want, so I usually do a lot of adjustment. Now I'm just going to go over with the overlay mode in the brushes, and again I'm using an airbrush, and then just slightly painting on the hair a little bit to make it shinier. Overlay is a really good option for brushes to create some sort of a shine or glow to your paintings. So you can pick whatever color you want to add the glow. Like for the face, I picked the skin tone, which using the overlay brush mode painting on it, it creates a more yellowish glow compared to the hair, which I picked a green color to overlay on top of, which creates a bluish glow. So now I'm just going over with a normal mode brush with a very rosy color with the airbrush tool, and just softly brush on some more different tone on her face. So pretty much it's giving her a little bit more warmth and a little bit more fleshy color, and that's usually how I do it. I usually tend to have more than one color tone on her face. And now I'm just going over her eyes a little bit with the brush mode multiply, and just brushing on some darker shadow on her eyes to make her eyes a little bigger, just like how girls put mascara on their eyes to make their eyes bigger. It's the same principle, except makeup doesn't really translate, or digital painting doesn't really translate into makeup skill. Anyway, so I'm just putting some shadow inside her eyes, because if you notice looking at you guys in the mirror, you'll notice that you have some shadow in your eyes. And now I'm just gonna add some highlight on her brows, because that's where you tend to see pretty much the most high point of your face is the corner of your eyebrows, and also the nose, the tip of the nose, the eye tear duct, near the tear duct. That is also an area where you see some highlight. If you guys want some good reference, just look at some makeup artists or just some movie star or pop star and look at their makeup, and usually you can see all the highlights of their face, because they're very good with makeup. Well, their makeup artists are very good with makeup, and they usually highlight the best part of their face and make it look pretty, and it's a good reference, I find. Sometimes I like to go on YouTube and look at makeup tutorials, but I can never do them myself. But it's very useful. I mean, even guys like those stuff, because they're just so mystified by how girls can do that, you know? It's pretty amazing what people can do with makeup, and I think it can teach digital artists like us a few tricks about how to contour the face, shading them and stuff. So now I'm just going over the hair real fast again with a thinner brush, with the same brush, so the hard round brush with a little bit of hardness on or off. You guys can experiment with that. Right now I have the round brush with maybe 80% hardness on, and I'm just creating little hair textures here and there, just some strokes here and there. And again, it helps to zoom out at a time to see if the small icon is just as good as when you zoom in. And also it helps to flip your canvas in intervals. Make sure to always flip your canvas here and there once in a while to make sure you're on the right track and to see if you made any mistakes or not. And yeah, now I'm just shading in a little bit here and there, making everything more 3D. So pretty much thinking about shadow and lightning and highlights and lighting. Sorry for the speaking typos. So yeah, I think I will transition the same color palette to the other part of her hair accessory. And I usually like to lasso parts of her body and adjust them because I don't like, I guess I wanted to make it black after all to match her hair dress. And we're just gonna do that real fast. Again, you can do a lot of color adjusting by going into image and then hue and saturation. But I guess I'll be keeping the white after all. I'm just gonna do a little random design. It doesn't have to be complicated. I'm just doing something like repeating shapes to bring more interest to her dress here. And we'll repeat the same thing on her other shoulder. So pretty much you can do some pretty cool designs by doing very easy repetition patterns. And yeah, I'm just going to shade in some more color. So now you kind of see there's a little bit of a design going on her shirt. And it's always useful to keep in mind what design you want to do, just to keep it more interesting, you know. And now I'm doing a little design on her headdress. It's not really the same as the one on her shoulder, but it kind of has a repetition to it, which is kind of in the theme that we want. Usually when you design something, you want to keep in the theme of something. If you have repetition going on in one part of her design, it's always useful to have the repetition going on in other parts of her design as well. So now I'm trying to find a somewhat of a cool shape for her hat, but I'm not sure. We'll just experiment with that. I mean, nothing's ever wrong, but usually you kind of get a feel of it. So if it feels right, it might be right, but if it doesn't feel right, then it might be time to change it up a bit. So pretty much I'm flipping my canvas once again to make sure that the design is coherent and there's good stuff going on. Now I'm just gonna go over the little intricate design going on in her hair over there, and I'm gonna make it gold. I'm not sure, I'm still considering it, but yep. Now I'm gonna put some of her hair down there, just so that to demonstrate the hair is being bundled up by those accessories. And now I'm just gonna put some more shadow in her hair, making sure it's right there. That's good. There we go. And now I'm gonna copy and select it, copy paste it, and paste that process into my steps so you guys can take a look after to keep track of the steps. And now for the line art, you can choose to lower the opacity of your lines if you would like, but it's not recommended if you still don't feel like you have a good enough base to paint off of. Pretty much as you paint with the line art, you would either choose to delete the line art or just keep lowering the opacity little by little until you have good of enough guide to just do a full-on painting. And so that is the trick that I use when I do line art and painting. I pretty much start up with 100% opacity liner, and as I shade and paint and create volume, I slowly make the lines less obvious, and then paint on top of that, and then make it less obvious, etc, etc, until I can remove the lines completely. So what I did there was I adjusted the color balance of the color layer that I have. If you want to, I mean, it's really good for editing, so I'm just playing around with the settings, and you guys can do that as well. It's very useful when you're not sure what color looks good or not, and you guys can just experiment with those tools, which allows you to change the tone of your colors, and usually you can find something really cool that you haven't thought of, and yeah, it's pretty useful. And now I'm just going to select underneath the head because I'm going to create a drop down shadow, or just shade the hair more properly, again with the same brush, hard brush at a hardness of 50, and I'm just adjusting the size of my brush to smaller size and bigger size, and I'm just painting in the streaks, again thinking about highlights and shadow, making the parts in shadow a darker tone than the lighter tone that I'm using for the highlight. So pretty much it's all about painting. It's all about the color you pick, and it's about the shadow you place, and the highlights as well. So right now I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do with the hair, still experimenting with it. And I'm just going to keep painting, keep seeing what I want, and see if it looks good or not. Usually I go with my guts. I don't have any specific I don't have any reference right now, so I'm just going by guts. Sometimes I have sometimes you know, sometimes you guys see something and you guys have that image in the back of your head, and when you go about doing something and you recall what you saw, and that's what you try to duplicate sometimes, and that's what I'm doing. Sometimes I see something, I have it in the back of my mind, and then when it comes time to creating something similar, I access that area and I just use that mental image, I suppose, and try to see what I can come up with. So now, if you notice, I'm using a little bit of a gray tone in the hair, because usually a gray tone is a very good neutral color to put in shadow, and it creates a very nice effect, very nice shading effect. So now I'm just going to go over with a airbrush, a general airbrush, and I'm gonna pick the skin color and brush it onto the ends of the hair to create that manga-ish look. A lot of Japanese or Asian inspired artists like to do this. It creates a kind of nice gradient effect from the hair to the skin, and it's pretty nice. I've seen this trick done by a lot of really good artists, and it's a nice trick to experiment with in case you're not sure what you like. Yep. So pretty much we're just gonna see it again with the lines, and to see if we're ready to ditch them, or if we want to keep them. It's really up to you. You guys can start deleting the lines and just start painting from there, or just keep the lines. But usually I would probably just delete the lines at this point, because we already have a good base without the lines, and we can just start painting from there. But yeah, it's up to you guys. And then now we're just gonna go in and put on multiply mode, and just going back to the standard round brush, making the face a little bigger. So at this point I merged down the lines with the color layer so that I can start tweaking the proportions of the characters. And by doing that, I just select the parts of the character I want to resize or change, and then I copy and I paste, Control C and then Control V, and then I do Control T, which is transform, which allows you to change the dimensions or manipulate the pixels of the part you want to modify. And now I'm just gonna try to attempt to blend my face into the picture. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good enough job, but usually this part you guys don't really need to worry about it, because then you can just paint over the parts that look like they're repeating. And I know this is a little tedious, but it's very good practice if you do enough of this. So usually a lot of times when I draw, I make a lot of mistakes, and I do change them by going about with the same process. And the more times you do it, I feel the more practice you get. So in a way, it's kind of a good thing, because you guys get a lot of practice out of it at the same time, even though you're redoing the same thing over and over again. But repetition is pretty good. It's I've done so many edits. I think around 40% of what when I paint is all about editing. And yeah, right now I'm just making the background a little darker because I feel it might work better. Now I'm gonna start detailing up the face a little bit by working slightly on the nose a little bit, just adding a little bit of shadow, refining the nose a little bit. Right now it looks a little too plastic, so I want to fix that a little bit. So adding highlight and shadow will help that. And just gonna blend in the nose area a little bit here and there, again with the round brush, using the eyedrop tool, picking up color and placing the stroke down, and adding the nostril to make it a little more obvious. And yeah, it's all about picking up color and putting them down to form the shape you guys want. Sorry about that, my voice is a little breaking because I've been talking a little too much. But yeah, now we're gonna experiment with some brushes. Right now I'm gonna take that brush I just selected. It's the brush I made specially for hair texture, and we're just going to paint on a little bit of the eyebrows using that same brush, and just here and there place the stroke down. Again, you guys can experiment with all types and shapes of eyebrows. And now I'm gonna work on the eyes a little bit. So pretty much we're going to just refine the shape a little bit, making the pupil inside a little obvious, and we're gonna just go to a more neutral color for the eyes, but it could be any really, and place that color in there to make it so the pupil stand out a little more, so the color is a little dark, brighter. And now we're just going to paint in the little space between your eyes and your eyelashes. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's there. If you guys look at your eyes, you'll see it. And then we will go and use the airbrush here right now and brush in some circular shape in the eyes. As you can see, it gives a very soft feeling. And we're just gonna go pick a really light color and put the size to 5 and just make a very roundish color and erase off some of that to put a highlight in there. And to be honest, it could be any shape. It could even be a star, so you guys can have fun with that. It could even be a heart shape. as long as there's somewhat of a highlight in there. You guys can have fun with that. And yep, now I'm just going to go ahead and just blend it in a little bit, add a little bit more of refining the eyes a little more, and adding some more eyelashes on the side. And when I do eyelashes, I usually use a very thin brush. 3 would be a good number. And then I'm gonna go into the brush settings, which you can access via window, and then go into brush, and then I'll open this window, and then make sure the transfer is on, both on pen pressure and then the sharp dynamics, which makes your brush look like a very pressured brush. So yeah, now you can do really nice eyelashes and just do them individually in this fashion, like this and that, and just place them really carefully, very carefully, like that. And I think we're good. And I'm just gonna do a little bit of a highlight in the eyes with the white color, just contouring the shape of the pupils and the whites of the eyes. And now we're gonna pick a white color and put a dot in the white of the eye for highlight. And I'm just gonna refine the tear duct a little bit on her eyes and see where that gets us. So that's basically how I draw eyes. And now we're gonna pick a pink color and add the tear duct color to her eyes. And now we're gonna flip the canvas to see if it's good and all. And this is what we have. I'm gonna pick a airbrush and put small shadow underneath her eyes using a darker tone, and just apply it very smoothly. Again, changing up the size so that I can get the most coverage I can. Now I'm gonna make another layer and just paint over the eyebrows a little bit, because I feel that it might be better with something else, and I kind of want to go with a shorter eyebrows, something like this, to make her look a little more innocent. So I'm just gonna go over it and fix the shape. Again, you guys can keep the same eyebrows, or you can change up the shape a little bit. It's really fun. So basically, if you guys want to do a change or anything, always make a new layer on top and just paint over it to see if that's what you want. And when you're satisfied, you can just merge down the layer. And now I'm gonna see what I can do with the hair, because I'm not really happy with it. So I'm just gonna play around with the transformation tool, which is Control T, right click and click on warp, which allows you to warp the pixels around. And yep, I'm just seeing what I can do again with the warp tool. Control T, transform, and then right click on the box and then select warp. It will give you this kind of a box with little guidelines. And now I'm gonna adjust the hue and saturation of the hair to see what I like, because I'm still not sure. So I'm just gonna see what I like. I guess I won't pick any because I'm not sure. And I kind of want to resize the shape of the face a little bit, because I feel like her face is a little bit small. So I'm just copy paste down to a new layer and Control T to transform, and then making it a little bigger. And now I'm satisfied with that, and I'm going to merge down. And now I'm going to see what I can do with the hair. Still not sure. So right now I'm just zooming out to see what looks good and flipping the image once again to see what works best. So now we're gonna select the hairbrush once again, that is in the brush set that I included, and now we're just going to do some hair shading. So pretty much it works the same as a regular brush, except it's got a certain texture to it. So just casually experiment with them. Again, I'm picking up highlights and shadows, and using the eyedrop tool to select the colors, and shading it and putting them down as I paint on her hair. So just one step at a time, see what we can do with it, like this, like that, placing strokes here and there, see what we got. And pretty much it's all about just painting it on, seeing if it works, and if it works then that's great, you know? So that's what I'm doing, picking up shadow here and there and then placing highlights here and there. And that creates the illusion of hair and highlight. And right now I'm thinking maybe it's not the best idea to put a streak of different hair, so I'm just covering it up with the hair color, the usual hair color. And then again I'm zooming out to see if it looks good. And now continue on with the shading. I'm going to adjustment and use hue saturation to see if I can get a better color for this, because I'm not very sure for it. So I'm just gonna play around with the hair color and see what we get. And see, I think I want to go for more of a blue, like a little like turquoise, a little bit like that. And once I'm happy with the change, I click OK. And then I'm going to erase a little bit of it so it kind of blends in with the skin. Again, this hair change is on a separate layer, so I can always delete it if I don't like it, or keep it if I do. So now I'm just gonna go over it and gonna paint over it to blend it better with the face. Again with the same hairbrush. And yeah, just keep going until you get something you like. And now I am going into the dodge tool, select the brush mode at medium tone, which allows you to highlight some of the face areas to make them look more radiant. So I'm just going to add that on there. See, as the tone changes to really bright, and I'm just gonna add the shadow, which is by going to the brush mode, switch to the brush mode multiply, and just apply some of the shadow on there. I'm adding a little bit of a warm blush to her face, just a little bit. And then I'm gonna go with the lips a little bit, switch the multiply mode to normal once, to color, just to change the color of her lips. And then going back to normal once again, and then select the pinkish color for the lips, like so, and just brush it on. Also, if you're not too sure what color to pick for the lips, what I would do is I would just go on Google and Google lips, and usually I just use that as reference. And whenever you're not too sure about something, it's always good to Google stuff, or just go on DeviantArt and look up the thing you're not too sure about and see how other artists do it, and then you can take that as a example. Now I'm just going over to put more shadow by the nose, and so on, and lighten up, just smoothing out the face area with the airbrush tool. Again, smoothing out, picking up color and smoothing out. It's a continuous process. And maybe make her smile a little bit on the side. Just detailing up the lips a little bit, putting on the highlights and the shadows, like so. And adding a little more shadow underneath her upper lip. I'll put the shadow on her bottom lip. And now I'm just going to continue on with some of the rim light, and I'm making sure it stands out by painting in her hair slightly a little bit more with a darker color. And now I'm just going to blend her hair a little bit more by again using the eyedrop tool and picking up color and putting it down, picking up color and putting it down. And you can access the eyedrop tool real fast by pressing Alt, which make the eyedrop tool appear, and then you can pick up the color you want, and then release the shortcut Alt, and then it will go back to your brush icon, which then you can use to put the color down. So this is what I do. It's pretty much a repetition of picking up color and then putting them down. And then I'm just picking up more color and putting them down. Now I'm adding a little bit of a rim light on the hair, and continue on to refine the hair a little bit, adding a little bit of shadow underneath and highlights at the same time, just like that. And keep adding shadow on the side because the light is coming from the left, so we want to put the shadow on the right, just like that, just a little bit. And since we're simulating hair strands, it's good to have a little bit of a pressure point, like a taper at the bottom, to make it look more hair-like. So now we're just refining the face a little more, just placing the strokes down a little bit at a time, like so, and then I'm changing up the brush size. As the hair strands get thinner, the brush size also gets smaller. So you guys can do that from a big brush painting strands of hair together to smaller strands of hair with a smaller brush. So now we're going to go up and clean up some of the hair. Since the hair is on a separate layer, we can easily use the erase tool and just erase the hair to make it more tapering at the end, to make it look more like hair. So now we're just gonna go in with a darker shadow and then just painting the hair a little, adding a little bit more shadow and cleaning it up a little more. And now we're gonna see if it works. Do we like the hair? Zooming out to see if it works. And now we're gonna use the airbrush again, and this time select the mode of soft light, which adds a very nice soft glow to the face when you select the skin tone. So we're just going to go with that, and going back to airbrush mode with multiply to add a little bit of shadow underneath the hair. I'm going back to erase some of the parts on the hair layer just so that the shadow would show a bit more underneath. And now I'm gonna fix it with the normal brush and just painting a little bit. Now I'm gonna create some drop shadow on the eyelids by lassoing the section I want to add shadow. And I'm using the airbrush and just lightly paint in the shadow. And I'm going to the normal layer and adding a little bit of an eye bag, or just smoothing out her eyes, and going to the lasso tool and lasso the side of her face. And I'm just gonna clean up her face slightly by using the airbrush tool and brushing, blending her face in a little bit by using the airbrush tool, just picking up the color and shading it like this, like so. And now we have a cleaner face shape, pretty much like so. Now we're using the same brush, the airbrush, and just shading it in a little bit. Now we're making it small again to see what it looks like in the small view. Again, it's very useful to look at your working smaller, just to see if the small icon is just as good as the big version of your work, because sometimes you can't see what you can with the smaller view. So that's what we're gonna do. Now she kind of looks presentable. We're just gonna keep going and refining more maybe adding a little detail on the eyebrows. So pretty much what you want to do is you want to start doing the bigger stuff, working on the bigger surface like the hair, and then after you want to transition that into smaller works. So now I'm just going to go apply some shadow by going to the brush mode and then putting the mode to multiply and just giving a little bit of shadow. Now I'm adding highlights. Just pick a white color and start slightly put in some highlights here and there, just a little bit here and there. Just add a little bit of a brush stroke here and there to simulate shadow and highlights. It doesn't need to be very extreme, so pretty much I'm shading and blending the face as I go and making sure everything is smooth and good. Now I'm adding some highlight to the lips a little bit using the same white color and just adding some of the highlights like so, again using the white color, and then eye drop with a darker color and blending them in. Same thing with the shadow. And so now we have this, and we're just gonna go in and refine some of the headdress element by just refining some of the shapes. And now I'm going to go back to the hair, just cleaning it up a little bit more, and use the airbrush tool just to create, just to add some rim light in there, again with the airbrush tool. So now I merged down the hair layer because I was happy with it, and now I'm gonna work on the headdress. So pretty much I just pick up color and paint with that color and just keep blending it in. Same principle, pick up the color and then dropping that color down, picking up color, dropping it down, and adding some highlight, adding some shadow, blending it in pretty much. So that's what I'm doing, and adding some shadow here and there with the airbrush. So pretty much you can switch between the airbrush and the hard brush to see which effect look good. And when you're putting a general coat of shadow, it's usually good to use a airbrush, but when you want to put very sharp shadow, it's good to use a hard brush. So this is what I'm doing, and also I'm adding some shadow underneath the hair that is being covered by the hat, and just keep it up, adding some more highlights to the hair, and again using a small brush because I want to get some smaller details in, just like that, again like so, and keep doing it, just adding some more shadow there. And here you guys don't need to add shadow, it's just I'm a little anal about shadow and highlight, so I have to have it there. So now I'm just gonna go in the eyes and add a little bit more shadow in the eyes, and then switch to multiply brush mode and just airbrush some of that on the eyes to make it look like she has a little bit of a volume. Now I'm gonna copy paste the eyes and move it slightly to the left because I think it works better. It looks better to the left. And now I'm just going to erase the parts that are a little bit sticking out, and when I'm happy with it, I'm gonna merge that layer down. So now I'm gonna go into color, because just to make sure the white of the eyes isn't too red, so I just went in and was on the brush color mode with a very white color and painted it on to make it look less red pretty much. And now I'm going to go into the lasso tool, selecting the neck because I want to refine the neck a little more. Now just adding a little bit of a shadow underneath there with the tool. Again with the airbrush. The airbrush is really good for applying shadow that are smooth. And I'm just going to go in the hair and start painting it like so, again with different size brush strokes, bigger brushes for sections of hair, and then smaller brushes for strands of hair. So now I'm gonna switch to the hair and see what we can get. And I'm just testing out if I want a strands of hair with different colors on it, and I don't think I'll have that, so I'm not gonna put that in. But you guys can have fun with the hair by putting in different color strands. So now I'm just going to go over it with the hairbrush with texture on it for more hair textured painting. So I'm just zooming out and zooming in to see what looks good. Again with the hard round brush and going into shade her clavicle and chest area like so. And then I'm going to color rotation, flip that image once again, and then I'm gonna select the section right here, and that way I know it's clean and it's easier to work on. Now I can apply a little bit of a shadow and highlight to the silver lining of her coat. So I'm adding highlight and shadow at the same time. So I'm adding a little more shadow and a little more highlight in the shadow of that golden lining to create a shinier effect. Now I'm just gonna select the coat a little bit because I'm gonna work on that. And now I'm gonna pick a darker tone and then just paint on it to create shadow for that section. And now there's shadow for that section. Just work it up. I'm painting in some slight folds for her clothes, just like that. And again, I'm using the hard brush at a hardness of 50 to 60, and just keep refining and keep adding highlight to that area because there's a rim light going on the left side of her right now. And yeah, we're just going to keep putting on shadow and highlights in there. And if you're not sure where to put the highlights or shadow, just look at yourself for reference if you can, if you have the right light source, or if you could on Google. It would help to have a reference to start with, but if you don't, you might need to find a way to reproduce the lighting to help you. But in general, when I think of lighting, I always think of what is on top and what is on the bottom. Whatever is being overlapped is always mostly in shadow. So pretty much that's what I usually do. Now I'm just going to the levels adjustment to change up the intensity of her golden trimmings. And I zoom out to see if it looks good and flip the canvas as well. And now I have something I kind of like. can also use I'm going to select this part right here because the color is overlapping her chest area. So I'm gonna go in with the airbrush and in multiply mode and just brush on slightly a little bit the shadow, like so. And then go in with a normal brush on top of the color to make it so her color is standing out enough, like so. Always make sure the elements are overlapping one another, as in if the color is overlapping her skin, we have to make sure that it stands out. And now we're just gonna go over her hair a little bit more with shadow and highlights. Again, I'm using the hairbrush right there, and I'm just placing down the individual hair strands like so. Like so, and then picking up a darker color and airbrushing her face a little bit to see if it works. And this is where I create thinner strands of hair going across her face. So pretty much you always look better with a little bit of overlapping, as in the hair overlapping the face. It creates a sense of dimension. And as well as you can see, her hair is overlapping her neck and her chest a little bit, so that is also a plus. Now I'm recreating her undershirt, making it white to match the white of her coat. For design purposes, we always try to find ways to connect the elements of the outfit. So pretty much if her outfit is, for example, pink, then there's a good chance other part of her outfit is pink as well, for example. So pretty much we're just going to keep refining the picture little by little, and the undershirt as well, adding some shadow here and there, making sure everything looks good. And then maybe she's got some hair coming out of there too. There we go, we zoom out, and then we see what it looks like small. And then we flip the canvas to make sure that where our eyes are refreshed every time. So creating a new layer, I'm gonna test something out. I want to see if she looks good with two ponytails stuck together in one braid. And I'm just gonna do a really fast paint over to see if that idea looks good. Like so. Just again painting small strands of hair with smaller brush and bigger strands of hair with a bigger brush. And now I'm gonna see if it looks good or not. Actually, it kind of looks like a beard. And then if we rotate it, it still looks like a beard. I'm not sure, but it might be interesting, but it does look a little bizarre. So I might not keep it. And then we'll go back. And I'm just gonna copy and paste this and warp this ponytail down a little bit because I feel like it's sticking to her face a little bit too much. So what I did is I copy pasted, so Control C and then Control V, and then on that layer that I pasted onto, I did Control T and then right click to warp, and then I warped it to see if it looks good. And now I'm just testing out with other parts of her hair. So pretty much you guys can feel free to transform parts of your character to see what looks good and what doesn't. And it's always fun to see the more, and then obviously we'd have to go over and paint over certain areas to make sure everything looks good. And then we're gonna zoom out and see if it looks to see if it looks better. Like so. It kind of looks cute, doesn't it? It looks a lot better. It has a lot more breathing room, I find. And now we're just going to refine some areas. Maybe we can even change up the shape of her silhouette of her hair a little bit to match the hat, the motion that we have on her hat, which is pointing up a little bit. Maybe it'd be cool. So we're just gonna duplicate that shape and see what we can get with it. So pretty much never be afraid to try something different, because you never know what looks good. So we're just gonna do that and just experiment with the shape a little bit and the color, like so. I'm picking the black and the yellow, orangish, golden trimming to match her headdress, because I want to keep her design consistent. And now I'm just gonna paint in her hair a little more, because her hair is overlapping the headdress, just like so. And now I'm just going to use the lasso tool and select the shape of the hair, some of her hair strands, so I don't have to go in and painting manually. I can just use the lasso tool to lasso the shape in and just add the highlights here and there. It's easier because you don't have to paint using a brush. It can take longer, but with the lasso tool you just have to make the shape and just paint that in. Very easy. It saves time. So pretty much I'm just adding some hair here and there. So right now I'm just still considering the hair because I'm not sure what I want. But in the meantime, I can always clean up the face a little bit, because we're gonna keep the face, so we're just gonna clean it up a little bit, like so. And using the hard brush to add a little bit of a highlight in there. But you can use the airbrush as well, it doesn't really matter. It just depends on what effects you want. The hard brush gives a more sharp shading, while the airbrush is really good for very soft shading, like blush and blending and such. And the harder brush is good for adding sharp shadows in there, like the hair strands and hair tufts, like so. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of a rim light on the side to see how it would look. And again, we're just going to experiment with that. Painting is all about experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. Alright, so we're back. Sorry about that, my voice was super tired. I'm sorry about that. I was just a little tired, but we're back. Anyways, so pretty much, let's see what we'll be doing now. Switching to the other layer, and now I'm just quickly seeing if she looks okay with elf ears and see if it's too busy or not. And we're just gonna do it on a separate layer, have that on a separate layer, and to see if it looks too busy or not. And it did, so I deleted them. So pretty much I usually, if I want to add different elements, I would do so on another layer, and if it doesn't look good, I usually delete them. And And again, I'm zooming in and out quite often to make sure it looks good on the small icon as well as on the bigger canvas. Now I'm going to try to add some more hair accessories to her face, because I feel as if her hair braid here is a little bit, the shape is a big blotchy shape, so I'm just trying to break that shape up by adding another element to it, which is the hair accessory, and we're gonna see if that works. So right now I'm thinking maybe she would look better with shorter hair, so I'm selecting the shape really fast and I'm just painting over the hair to make it look like she has shorter hair. So pretty much I'm trying to see if it looks better or not. And don't be afraid to paint over your own creation if you feel like the idea you have just isn't what you want. Always paint over something instead of undoing, because that allows you to get extra practice in, and practice makes almost perfect. So yep, that's my model. And right now I'm just going to go over her undershirt a little bit, painting over it because the hair was overlapping there, and I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit, like so. And now you can kind of see that her hair isn't as busy as it was before, because before it was blocking her neck and her torso area. So now it's a lot cleaner with shorter hair, and I think I'll go with that. So again, I'm verifying if it works better or not. And I like it. I like short hair better, but you guys can pick whatever you want. Again, it's all about what you want. If you feel that it looks better, then go for it. It's all about, well, it's not all about instinct, but part of it is. And usually I go with what I feel looks right for the character, and in this case I feel that it looks right. So now I'm just going in and making her torso area a little brighter, because it was getting a little too dark. And I'm using the same brush with the same hardness, about 50% hardness with the round brush, and just going in and blending it using the eyedrop tool, which is the shortcut is Alt and picking up the color and blending it, picking up the color and blending it. And now I'm going into the smudge tool and turning the scatter on slightly and making sure the strength is to 7 or less. So with that the smudge tool can have a very, very nice blending effect. Now I'm just gonna go over with the lasso tool the overshirt to make sure it is clean. I'm just adding a little bit of a drop shadow for it, because everything that overlaps your character creates a shadow, and we have to keep that in mind. So every time there's a piece that overlaps your character, it's wise to put some shadow behind the surface that is being overlapped. So yep, now I'm just looking at it, seeing if everything's good. And I think it looks good. Everything's ready to go. Alright, so again I'm going over her torso, adding a bit of shadow underneath there, and lassoing her face a little bit because I want it to look cleaner. And I'm just gonna soften her shape up with the airbrush slightly, again with the lasso tool, like so. And now I'm going over with a multiply brush mode to paint in the shadow for her neck, drop her face drop shadow, make sure, because it's overlapping her neck, and thus we have to add some shadow underneath, which is just a darker tone. So we're going to use the smudge tool and just blend that in a little bit, again with the same setting, and switching back to the standard brush and just lightly paint in some more shadow here and there. And on the other part of her face as well. Again, using the smudge tool to smooth out some of the areas, like so. And again, we're gonna lasso her neck area to properly refine it so that it's very clear and sharp. We're gonna keep things crisp and sharp, and that is achieved through the lasso tool, is one of the ways we can achieve that. Or you could do it the old-fashioned way with a hard brush tool, but that might take a little more time. We're just gonna do everything the most simplest way that we can. And now we're gonna check back to see if it looks good like that. And I think it looks pretty good like that. And now I'm just going in to paint a little pendant right there, like so. Again, applying colors and shading it. And I'm just painting in the basic design that I want for this piece, like so. Picking up the color and laying the stroke down, like so. And we're just gonna continue adding a little bit of highlight. And of course, you may switch to different brushes, as in switching to the airbrush, at the same time switching to the standard round hard brush to create a different shadow, different degree of shadow, as in soft shadow to hard shadow. And now we're just gonna add a little bit of a highlight by using the overlay tool of the brush mode, and just select a yellow tone and paint yellow tone and just softly paint on the gem to give it a glow look. And now I'm going to refine a few areas, just adding a little bit of thinking about design, thinking about connectivity, just adding some blotches of black here and there to match the design. And I think I'm going to change up the shape for that to a more rounder shape, her shoulder area, to a more rounder patch. Maybe that will work better. So I also use the lasso tool to design because it allows clean shapes. So pretty much like so, and just paint that in. And see if it looks good when it's small. And now we're gonna flip the canvas once again to see if it looks good. So right now we have something like this, and it's getting there. It's definitely getting there. And we're just gonna clean up some of the areas. I use the lasso tool to select the areas I don't want, and I delete them. And now I'm going to warp this area a little bit, just to make it more dramatic. So I selected the section I wanted to change, and I press Ctrl T, which then brings up the transformation box, and I right click on that box and selected warp, and that was what I used to play around with the shape of that headdress area. So now we're going to go in the lips and see what we can do to refine it a little bit more, because we want her lips to be better looking. There's many ways to paint lips, but right now I'm just going to do a general passive shadow and highlight. So pretty much I'm picking up the shadow and the highlight, and maybe she would have a little bit of an opening in her lips, and maybe I'll try a different shape for the lips, like a rounder shape, because I tend to have a certain shape for the lips, but now I'm gonna try to see what other lip shape I can put, like so. See if that works. Adding some shadow underneath the upper lip because the shadow's casting on her lower lip, and we're just going to smooth it out like so. And we're going to smooth out her eyes a little bit with the airbrush tool, like always, and put some multiply to put some shadow on her face. Shadow is always good when you're trying to make something 3D, but you have to be careful where to put the shadow. At the same time, you need the shadow to make it look 3D. Now I'm just gonna go in and add a little bit more blush, like so. Sometimes the blush can be a little too intense, so we're gonna bring that back a little bit, like that. And we're going to keep blending in the blush a little bit, like that. Now it looks a lot better, like so. And just with the same brush, the airbrush, just smooth out everything. And I'm gonna give her a button nose, like so. Just make her the tip of her nose a little rounder and create a little bit of a shadow on there, like that. And just keep shading, keep blending in the colors, like that. And you can also use the smudge tool to blend in. You don't necessarily need the airbrush tool. Both of them are pretty good, and it does pretty much the same thing. And now I'm going to use the dodge tool in mid-tone and just brush on lightly on her face to give it the radiant effect, like that. And I'm gonna flip my canvas to make sure everything's good. Flip it on that side. It's coming along nicely. And again, I'm experimenting with proportions with the lips and such to see what looks good. If something is odd looking, I would try to fix it by tweaking around with the proportions, but otherwise I would leave it alone. And now I'm just going over the face a little bit with the dodge tool. Now I want to create a shadow, so I'm going to select the hair area with the lasso tool, and I'm gonna use the multiply mode for brush and just slightly paint on some shadow, just slightly, like that. And now you can see there's some areas, but that's no problem. We can paint that in. We can paint that in very carefully, like so. Again, using a very thin brush I'm creating the simulation of hair strands and just cover up all that sharp edge that is being created by the lasso tool. And I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow on this side as well. Like so. Just slowly, subtly add a little bit of shadow underneath the hair. It needs to be obvious enough, but at the same time, do not overdo it. Something like this. So now it looks kind of like shadow. And we're going back to the normal brush mode and just blend that in. Same with the hair. So now I'm just adding a little bit of detail here and there. Now I'm going to proceed in adding some of the rim light on the other side. The colors I'm picking for the shadow is a little different from the highlight. The colors are a little darker because it's in the shadow. And again, I'm using the same rim light same tone for the rim light for the hair and everything else. Just like so. I'm picking up the color and laying it down. Now I'm just trying to blend everything together. Now I'm going to add a little bit of shadow underneath her hair, her headpiece. I just selected a dark color and make sure the mode is in multiply and just brush that down like so. Now it kind of looks like, oh no, it's the kitty, he came to visit, if you guys heard that. So now we're just making sure that the shadow is there. So we're going over stuff and adding shadow, and in this case I'm gonna add a bit of highlight to the rims of her headdress. By doing so, I picked a lighter color and just plopped it down, and I'm placing random strands of highlight in sort of random sections of the headdress. And as well as placing shadow. Hey boy, what's up? Oh, so cute. He's lost. Anyways, so pretty much I'm going about refining a little more and placing highlight and shadow here and there, like so. And we're just gonna keep picking up color and placing them down, making sure everything is clean. Hey kitty, hey Gaga. He's such a cute kitty. I got the kitty with me now. So pretty much right now, I picked a lighter color to put on the headpiece because there should be a little bit of a highlight, and I'm keeping it in a very restricted area, like so. Trying not to make the highlight too wide, just keeping it in a confined space. So just make sure everything is highlighted and have shadow in them. And now I'm gonna add a bit of drop shadow to this section of the headpiece by using the lasso tool once again and selecting the multiply brush mode and just brush on the shadow slightly. And after you do that, sometimes you want to blend in the shadow a little bit like that. And I'm just gonna keep working on the rim light a little more, like so. Just adding highlight and adding a bit of highlight and shadow and highlight again. So going over with the standard round brush, put some shading to it, add some more shadow, the rim light. And just keep adding shadow and highlights and slowly refining each section. Like there. Now I'm adding some highlight over there. I'm just gonna add some more highlight in the small areas as well. Like so. Like that. And then add some more shadow in the rim light. And just I'm sectioning off the shadows to make it give a very shiny metallic effect. So now I'm gonna blend the bottom part as well. And again adding shadow and highlights in different sections of the rim, the golden rim, to give it that very metallical, shiny look to it. And now I'm gonna add a little bit of rim light here and there. Continue it on the other side, which I might decide to later remove if it doesn't work out. Again, I'm just experimenting with the rim light. A lot of times you guys will have opportunities to try stuff out, experiment to see if it works or not. And that's how we're gonna do it, like so and like so. See if it looks good with a wider range of rim light, like that. So let's continue on to see if it works better like this. So pretty much I'm just laying down lighter tone, and then I'm going over it to cover it up, to cleaning out the highlights, and so on and so on. So I'm pretty much just using the eyedrop tool and just selecting the color, the highlights and the shadow, and just laying it down like that, picking up the darker color. And now I'm just gonna go in and clean it up with the lasso tool by selecting the area I don't want, and then I delete them after. And also I'm gonna fix the shape of the headdress a little bit, just using again the lasso tool to shape it out. The lasso tool is really good to fix silhouette. It's very quick and it's very clean as well. So now I'm just using the airbrush tool to put some soft shadow on that area, like so. And I'm just gonna lasso this section real fast because I'm planning to put some shadow there. So again, picking up a darker tone and just using the airbrush to brush on some shadow. And if we zoom out, it's starting to look good. It's getting there. So now again, we're gonna try to go for a color dodge brush mode, which allows you to add on lighter color. And now we're gonna switch to the color brush mode, which allows you to change the color palette of whatever you paint on. So just play around with that. Try to see what she looks like with purple eyes, gold eyes, green eyes, etc. It's pretty fun when you can experiment with colors for the eyes of your characters. Just use the color brush mode. It's really simple. So now I'm just using a random brush that you can find right there, and that brush wasn't made by me, it came with Photoshop. I believe it was in the dry media brushes when you load different Photoshop brushes. And I like to experiment with these brushes. You guys should also experiment with Photoshop brushes, because the program actually comes with a lot of different brushes that you can access by opening up the brush library and then right clicking on the little black arrow on the side and just press load brush, and there is a list of brushes that you can choose from, like the dry media brush, the faux brush, and the calligraphy brush, and a lot more, so you guys can test it out. So anyways, right now I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna add some design to the hairpiece that I put on her hair. I'm thinking of doing a repeated pattern like I did for her dress right here, and I'm gonna just repeat on the other side for consistency. And again, feel free to change up the size of your brushes if you feel that it's too small or too big. We want to get a decent sized brush here, and just repeat the pattern on the other side as well. And now we're just gonna go in and add some shadow, just again with a darker color, just adding some shadow here and there like so to sculpt out the shape. And again, we're gonna put some shadow in between the line there to create a metallic effect, and also adding some shadow underneath as well. Now we're gonna pick a really light color and put some highlight on the ornament, and just a little bit of highlight here and there, just a dab of that. And now let's see, just cleaning up the hair over here a little bit, like so. And again on the rim light, making sure everything is smooth and clean. This is pretty much the final stage of painting, where I'm just going to go in and just refine some of the final details, such as rim light and other small source of lighting, as well as just cleaning up the shapes a little bit. Like I'm doing right now, I'm cleaning up the hair shape, making it a little more tapered at the end, and just adding some more highlights here and there. And now it's time to pass on to the other side of her headdress. Again, we're gonna go in with some shadow and highlights. The shadow, just put it in the corner, and the highlights in different section of the golden rim. And now I'm gonna clean it up with the lasso tool a little bit, because it was getting a little messy. And just once again, I'm going to use the lasso tool to clean out the hair a little bit, and just put a drop shadow behind it, because the hair is overlapping her headdress on the other side, so there should be somewhat of a shadow. And then I'm gonna do it to that side as well. Again, it's a little too much, so I just lighten it a teensy bit. Yep. And now I'm just gonna keep on doing some cleaning and just put some drop shadow refining on her color that is overlapping her chest area, so I put some shadow there. Now I'm going to lasso her nose a little bit just to refine the shape a little bit with the lasso tool. Just like that. The lasso tool is very useful when you want to do a very clean job at refining areas and the lip as well. I'm just going to add a little bit of a cast shadow underneath her lower lip to give it that 3D look and volume, as well as her lower lip. I will put some dark tone under there just because of the overlapping shadow. There we go, just like that. And just putting some more shadow on her lip, like so. And some final touches on the lip. Now I'm gonna try to add a little bit of a lip texture by selecting a lighter pink color, like so, just a little bit lighter. And then I'm gonna do lines on her lip, some line textures on that side and then on the other side as well. It has to be a little subtle like that. And now I'm gonna go in and select a really light color, mostly white, and then I'm gonna create a very glossy effect. Make sure the hardness is set to 90 or 80 and have the sharp dynamics on for your brush setting, and just doodle some random lines like that to create a shine on the lips, like that. Just slowly dabble it on there, and then we can have a bit of highlight on top of the lips as well, and then maybe underline some highlights at the bottom of her upper lip, just a little bit, like so, and just blend that in a little bit. So now it looks like her lips she's got lip gloss on pretty much. Now just blend that in. You can use the airbrush to blend that, or you could use the smudge tool as well. And I'm just going in and adding some highlights and such, like so. And now there you go. She looks like she's got lip gloss on. Shiny lips. And now I'm just gonna go in and add a little bit of a shine on her nose just by dabbing a white smudge on there and refining her nostril a teensy bit, and also her eyes a little bit, adding some highlight in the tear duct and then some highlight on the whites of her eyes. We might have to go back and rework her eyes, but for now we'll just refine it a little bit, adding some more pink shade inside that area of her eyes there. Now we're going to select the airbrush tool and the multiply brush mode and just add some more shadow. This time it'll be a very soft shadow, like so, on her dress. And then we'll change it back to normal. Now we're just gonna add a little bit of detail on her dress once again for the purpose of design. So just remember the repetition part. We're gonna keep on using that theme for her dress here. So we'll be doing some repetition and we'll be just drawing some lines across like this, and that will be our repetition theme. But just like this might be a little boring, so we'll be adding another element after. But right now I'm just going in and adding some highlight and indents to our clothes detail. So now we're just gonna add the extra detail, adding a little bit of a darker pattern here. It kind of looks like wings, kind of like the Egyptians. I think that looks cool, so I'm going with it. Just like this. And again, it's repetition. And since we have it on the other side, we should have it on the opposite side as well. Just so it makes sense. And now we're gonna have some other patterns like this. Again, with repetition, we want to make it repeat so it looks consistent in our design. Always think of consistency and repetition when it's applied, of course. It always looks more interesting. So right now I'm just going in and adding some highlight and shadow, like so. And now I'm just going to make it more obvious that we have a tuft of hair over there. And again, I'm using a small, medium-sized hard round brush, and I'm just adding strands of hair here and there, like so, just to add some volume here and there, like so. Again, I'm picking up color and laying them down with the eyedrop tool, which you can access via shortcut with Alt and then release. So pretty much we have the hair ready, almost ready. We have a good sort of shading going on. There we go. And now I'm just gonna keep refining as I go along, cleaning up some of the shapes, like so. And I'm just gonna go in and change up the silhouette for the hair accessory there. And I'm just adding a little bit of highlight and shadow there to make it look 3D, more 3D, like so. So now I'm adding a little bit of more of a highlight on the most high point of the shape there in the center to create a more shiny effect. And I'm just gonna go in and follow suit with the other parts of the hairpiece, like so. And I'm just gonna smooth out the color a little bit, like that. So pretty much I'm just going over and doing a little bit of a refining, adding shadows here and there, and making sure that everything looks right, all the lighting and shadow is correct, and going over the hair down, the hair tuft right there, and just using the same brush, just with pressure of course, just placing some strokes and then picking up the darker color and then blending that in, as well as adding some highlights as well. It's a continuous process, very repetitive. So now I'm just gonna copy this piece that I finished, and I'm gonna copy paste it, Control C and Control V, and then I'm going to warp this, which is Control Transform, Control T, and then right click and press warp, and then I'm gonna make sure it matches that side and that angle. So pretty much I like to reuse parts of same elements if it's repeated on the other side of the character, and this saves a lot of time. You can, of course, after pasting it, edit it a little bit to make sure it's not completely the same or symmetrical. And we're gonna do that right after I paint in the tuft of hair on the other side. And again, just blending it in, changing it up, changing the shape up, putting some shadow here and there. And again, with the multiply mode, just adding some soft shadow on the other side. Now I'm going to submerge most of this piece in shadow because I'm going to be putting a bit of rim light on the side of that hair ornament, because the rim light is on that side, so we have to show it clearly in order to make it feel like it's in the same side as the hair and the rest of the areas where it's in rim light. So we're gonna do that right now. And now I'm just adding a little bit of a shadow, cleaning up the dress a little, and adding rim light to the coat, so that it feels like everything on that side is in rim light. And now I can do a little adjustment by going into image, adjust brightness, contrast, and just adjust it a little bit. You can always do small adjustments while you're working to make sure your image is always looking the way you want. So pretty much I'm just submerging it in shadow. And now I'm just gonna clean up the hair a little bit by using the lasso tool, and also that side of the hairpiece and the other side of the hairpiece with the lasso tool. It's really a great tool for cleaning up stuff and making everything sharp, clean, and straightforward. Now let's think about what we're gonna put on her, the areas where there's nothing. So let's see, we could give her a cape. That would probably work, so let's do that. Pretty much I'm sticking to the same theme, so if we wanna go with that, let's pick a color that she already has. So pretty much I went with her hair color, and she's gonna have a turquoise coat, cape. So that's what we're gonna do, like that. She's gonna look like a magic girl for sure. And now we're gonna make the rest of her torso cloth black. So she's got a turquoise coat and a black dress, or black sweater dress. So I'm just gonna put some shadow under the cape because the cape is underneath, being overlapped by her shoulder part. So the cape should be in shadow because it's underneath. And now after, I'm going to go over it and just blend in the shadow a little more to make it look more organic. And again, I'm going over her sweater, or her dress part. And now I'm just gonna go over and paint in a rim, golden rim, just so it's consistent with the other golden rim that she has on her outfit, like so. And again, I'm always constantly cleaning up other areas of the character at the same time, just so I'm not too focused on one thing. And there we go, painting it in, adding some more rim light on that side because on the right there's rim light. And just adding shadow and highlight as I go. Shadow is usually just a darker tone and highlight is a lighter color. So adding that in, adding some shadow underneath that part, and just trying to blend everything in nicely. So now if we zoom out, we kind of get an impression of how she'll look. Always zoom out and check if the small icon is just as good as the bigger size image. And I'm just adjusting real fast the colors and such of the whole thing. So I think maybe the purple might work a little better. And then I selected OK. I usually always change my mind, so don't mind me. But I gotta go with my gut sometimes, and sometimes my gut say purple. So yeah, now I'm just adding a more general soft shadow to that side. Just want to make everything consistent. And adding a little highlight to that part of the hair decoration. I'm not really sure what it is. I think it's some sort of an ornament, but I'm just going in and adding a little detail here and there to the golden parts of it, creating shadow and highlight, like so. And of course there is shadow underneath it because it's overlapping the hair, so we're gonna put some shadow on the hair, and by shadow I mean a darker tone, just paint it on there. Like so. And just adding some more shadow underneath that hair because it's overlapping everything else there. So now I'm going to the dodge tool, make sure it's on highlight, and just slightly give a little bit of a highlight on that hair there. Sometimes it's okay to use dodge tool highlight, but sometimes it can be too bright, but in this case it was alright. So I'm gonna copy paste that section, and I want to see what it will look like with a different shape. And I'm just experimenting here. No need to worry because it's on a separate layer. And let's see what it looks like. I'm just going to experiment with this idea at first. But if I don't like it, I can always go back and delete the layer, and that would be that. No harm done. So it turns out I didn't like it, so I'm gonna delete it after all. So we're just gonna keep this shape right now. And now we're just gonna lasso something real fast, and we're going to paint in a shape. I want to create this kind of flap on the other side of her hair, so I just copy pasted one from the other side. And now I'm going to warp this, the same selection, and make it work for that angle. So I'm just going to warp it till it feels right. So like this maybe. And then I'm gonna lock down the layers so when I paint nothing comes out. And I'm gonna submerge that side in shadow because that side is in shadow, and add some rim light because that side is also in rim light. Gotta keep it consistent. And now I'm just gonna add some shadow underneath that layer of and now I'm just going to merge the shadow layer and that layer down and just warp both of them together to make sure that it contours her head shape nicely, like so. There we go. Now it looks like it's in shadow. And rim light. And we're just gonna flip that and see how it looks. And if I like the result, I just merge it down, and that's it. Now I'm just gonna go in and refine the face a little more. Maybe some of part of her face can be in slight shadow. So I'm just gonna do that. Taking a darker tone and just painting over her face a little bit. Again, I'm doing this on a separate layer so that I can edit or delete this easily if I don't like it. Also, I'm playing around with the opacity of this layer to see how it will look with just a little bit of shadow compared to a lot. So like this. I think this is the right amount of shadow. But since I put part of her face in shadow, I have to put part of her hair in shadow as well. So I'm gonna go in and just put more of her left side in shadow, since we're already doing it to her face and to her hair as well. Putting parts of her hair and face in shadow. And now I'm gonna go and redo the eyes. So what I typically do is I use a perfectly round brush and just dab on for the eyeballs and on a separate layer, of course, and then I just erase parts of it that is kind of sticking out. And then I go full opacity again, and just I'm adding a little bit of a shadow underneath, like so. And just create some more shadow here and there, like so. Create the pupil like that. And maybe make it a little darker. I'm going to filter, blur, and gloss blur. And then make her eyes a little blurry like that. And then adjustment, hue saturation, make the saturation less, make the eyes less saturated. If you want it to look more realistic, the eye should be less saturated. So now I'm going back to give it more blur. So I went back to filter, blur, and gloss blur once again. And this is the result. And just going over very carefully to shade that in nicely. And maybe add a little bit of a different color highlight. I'm just experimenting to see if it looks good. And then some highlight on the side because of the rim light. Again, I'm always experimenting. And then some more highlight over there. And just gonna use the lasso tool again, and I Control H, which is hiding the selection, and I'm just experimenting with some stuff. So I'm pretty much taking the eye color, the basic eye color, and just airbrushing it on there slightly and see what kind of effect it does. And again, I'm gonna put the highlights, and it should be a light color with the brush size to 3, and I'm just gonna add it in the center almost, like so, like that. So I redid the eyes because I wasn't sure about the eyes that was already done. Usually I would go over the eyes at least twice to make sure it's what I want, Maybe we'll have the cross there after all. I mean the sparkle in there, because it adds more personality and it's more fun. We'll just change it up a bit to make it not that obvious, like so. And now with the airbrush, I'm just going to make it a little lighter by just lightly painting it on the bottom left of each eye. Just lightly paint that on and just dabble, pretty much softly, like so. Now I'm just gonna go in and clean out the eyes a little bit by adding some shadow underneath, like so. Because if you look at it, our eyes at that point has a little bit of a shadow, like so. There we go, just adding some shadow underneath the eyes to make them really pop. Now they really look like dolly eyes. So now I'm just going back and forth and seeing what I like more. And usually it's helpful to have everything on a separate layer so I can see what different it is. And now I think I'll make her look up slightly, so I created a new layer and I'm painting on the corrections I want. So I'm picking up the whites of our eyes, and I am applying a very small section of it underneath to see if it looks good or not. And I'm warping the eyes a little bit to make her look a little bit to the left. See if that looks good or not. And I'm just going to paint over it to make it look more blended into it. So now it kind of looks like she's looking towards our direction, which is what I prefer, so I'm just gonna go with that. Now it looks a lot more, feels more realistic. Now I'm just gonna go over it again, just fixing some of the areas I think needs fixing. And adding some more shadow where I think more shadow should be added. Just some small details here and there, and adding some highlights here and there. Adding some more highlights in the eyes. Now time for the eyelashes. Pretty much pick a very thin brush with the pressure on, and just lightly brush on the eyelashes as well as the highlights for the white of her eyes, like so. Now I'm just gonna go in and add a little bit of highlight on that part of her undershirt because I find it a little flat, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of a highlight there, like so. Just going over, maybe she would look better with some sort of a crest on her collarbone area. Just some additional design element because I feel that area is a little empty, so I'm gonna add something there just for fun. And again, this is on a separate layer, so I can delete it anytime I want. And adding something on her forehead as well. Having fun and having fun with the design, so pretty much I just go about adding little details towards the end and experimenting to see what looks good and what doesn't. So here I'm trying to see if it looks good by adding some blue highlights to her eyes. And now I'm just gonna go over it again with a lighter color. I didn't exactly like the design I did before, so I'm just gonna redo it. It's all very experimental. I'm seeing if this would work or not. Just looking to see if this will work. I guess not. So I didn't like what was going on, so I'm just erasing parts of it and seeing if it would work like this. And again, I'm putting parts of it in shadow because I want to keep it consistent with the rest of her design and her body. So just putting the parts of her that are in shadow and leaving the highlights there for the part that is supposed to be in the light. So we have that. Now I'm just naming the layer real quick, but that could change very well. So now I'm just adding a little bit of a glow. I created another layer, put it on overlay, and just brush painting it on lightly with a bright color, like so. As well as other parts of her hair. And now you can see there are parts of her that are some glow to her face. I added some glow to her face, and now I'm just gonna add a little bit of a glow to the background because now it's time to focus a little bit on the background. Just picking up a random brush right now and doing some very small decorative lines around her, again with repetition because that is kind of the theme for her. Just lightly, like so. So usually for the background I tend to do very simple backgrounds for characters that I want to, because the main focus of usually for my pieces is the character and I don't want the background to stand out too much, so most of the time my backgrounds are very, very simple. So now I'm just adding like little random highlights on top of the pink lines to make them a little more interesting. And I'm going in with the brush mode overlay and just making them a little bit shinier, like so. But again, I'm doing it in a way where the elements of the background is surrounding her somewhat, so it frames her nicely. Now I'm going over some of the little details. I want to see if it works. If it doesn't, then I won't keep them. Now I'm gonna go into the color layer and just gonna add some of that lighting, the cast lighting that is being casted by those little blue glowy dots in the background, and just adding some rim light to it. Just very subtle, to make it feel like it's part of the environment. Just adding some more rim light because there's a blue glowy thing casting highlight or glow to her. So now I'm gonna think about the glowy bits and see if I want to keep it. I don't want to keep the part where her eyes are glowing, so I erase them. So I don't want to keep too much glowing, so I'm erasing parts of it. And I'm going to see if she looks good in another color, so I went on the adjusting tool, so image and then color balance, and just changing up the color tone a little bit to a more purplish shade. Now I think I'll make her eyes a little bit lighter or a different color, again with the same editing system. Go into image and color balance and just play around with the settings to see what you like best. And now I'm going to color brush mode and just going to blend that in a little bit, or you can just experiment with different color for the eyes, like you would have different shade of color in your characters' eyes. It makes them seem more special. And now I'm just gonna put some freckles. You guys know how I do it, right? So just with the freckle brush that I made, that I have included in the brush set, select it, turn on scattering, turn on sharp dynamics with the angle up to random, and turn up the spacing, and it will give you something like this, which then you can just paint on a little bit on a separate layer and then turn down the opacity as see fit. I just want to get a speckle of skin texture going on there, so we have that. So I'm just adjusting the freckle settings and again applying more freckle layers. So pretty much I would layer on the freckle texture maybe in 3 layers and just layer it on like so. And turn down the opacity. And then I'm going to use the burn tool that you see there and just add a little bit of shadow here and there. And use the highlight tool, put it in mid-tone and just highlight her cheek a little. Now I'm gonna go over her chin a little bit with the same freckle brush so that the freckle is sort of consistent, just going over her chin and her cheek. And then I'm gonna go into filter and blur and gloss blur and turn that up a little bit. And then paint on it once again with the freckle brush. Maybe some on her torso chest area, and going to blur once again, gloss blur, and turn the radius up to 3.5 and say OK. Now we have a little bit of a freckly blush on her cheek and chin and torso area. Now I'm just gonna go over the eyes a little bit to make them brighter, because her left eye is kind of in the light, so we have to make it brighter than the right eye. So now once again I'm adding more freckles, again with the same process, going into blur after adding freckles and turning down the opacity and then merging down the layer. Now I'm just going to go with the airbrush tool and just see what it would be like if parts of her face was in somewhat of a blue light, just to test it out to see if it works. If it doesn't, we don't have to do that. So now I'm just adjusting, putting parts of her hair in shadow, because since part of her hair, her face is in shadow, so I'm just going over into the image adjust and highlight on contrast, and I turn down the slider to make it in shadow. Once it's in shadow, I'm going over it to paint a bit of highlight over it, just to blend it in with the highlights, and then adding a bit more highlight on the side of her face, so that it makes sense that part of her face is in highlight and part of her face is in shadow, like so. And then maybe making that mark glow a little bit. Just pick the same color and then paint it on lightly with the airbrush tool. Again, I'm using the dodge tool, which I have selected, and just slightly paint it on a little bit lighter, because I thought that it was a little too dark, so now I'm just adding a little bit of shadow. And then add some soft light in her eyes. And now if we zoom out, she looks fine. So pretty much I'm also referring to the zoomed out version, making sure that it looks good. Like so. Now I'm just adding a little bit more shadow on the side, so that it feels like her hair tuft right there is casting a bit of shadow on her face, like so. Just going over her other eye to make the shadow less harsh and just smoothing it out. Now I'm double thinking on the tattoo, so I erased part of it. But I think I'll keep her upper magical markings on her face to add more character. Once again, I'm just adjusting the color for her. You can do so by going to image, adjustment, and then hue, saturation, or color contrast. And again with the brush mode, color, I'm just gonna test it out real fast what she would look with slightly reddish eyes. like so. There we go. Like so. Just adding a bit of more shadow here and there for final touches. And some final touches on her lips. And on her head. Some more rim light on the side of her face. And on the side of her nose. And maybe highlight her eyelashes a little bit. Like that. Now I'm gonna zoom out to see if it looks good. And there we go. So we have our finished product. Hopefully it was helpful to you guys. I had really a lot of fun doing this. So remember, when you're trying to paint with line art, make sure to keep the line art there until you're fully comfortable to go full out without the lines. At that point, you can either merge down the lines or just delete them altogether. Thank you guys for listening, and see you guys next time. So before we end this, I wanted to do a real fast step-by-step recap of what we just did to help you guys memorize or get caught up again. So the first step we had to do was to just do a really rough sketch. Time usually should be between 5 to 10 minutes. It should be very rough and very fast, not very time consuming. The second step we have to do is just another pass. So a second pass, just go over the rough lines that you did, create a new layer and sketch on top of that. Just bring forth some new ideas or just clean up the lines you have for the first pass. But it shouldn't be too clean, just make it so that it's enough to get by with the idea and such. Step 3 is to lasso the character shape that you have provided with your cleaner lines and fill in the selection with a grayish tone. Step 4 is to just apply basic neutral color, so pretty much just put in the neutral color for the face, the hair, the clothes, or any other stuff. Step 5 is to just apply a basic coat of shadow. It doesn't have to be detailed or anything, just use the airbrush tool and just put the brush mode into multiply and just apply it gently on the character. When we get to step 6, it's all about refining the character and such. So at this point, it's all about just refining the shadow, the highlight, adding details, and adding designs and stuff like that. So it's all about experimenting, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because to be honest, mistake is the best thing that could happen to you at this point, because it allows you to correct yourself and just gain experience from that, and plus it gets you more practice, so that's like a bonus, right? Step 7 isn't really a step, it's just an optional thing you could do, which is what I usually do when in the process of painting. I do a lot of editing, like color editing. For that, I would recommend you guys to check in often to the option which you can access at image and then adjustment, and then you can select either a contrast or hue and saturation or color contrast. Those 3 options allow you to manipulate the contrast or the color palette of your character, and that is very useful because sometimes maybe you want to change color to fit your background more, or to change your background color to fit your character more. So that is a really useful option to consider while you are painting. Alright guys, that concludes our tutorial for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you so much. See you guys next time!